She was just a little girl, 8 years old, kneeling on cold marble, scrubbing an invisible stain like her life depended on it. And maybe it did, because when Daniel Richardson, billionaire CEO, walked in at 2 a.m. and saw her there, everything he thought he knew about success, power, and justice shattered. The office was silent, too silent for a Friday night. No phones ringing, no footsteps, just the low hum of the city lights flickering through the windows on the 42nd floor. Daniel Richardson had only come back to grab a few documents, nothing important. But what he found waiting in that quiet, polished space would change everything. He stepped out of the elevator, loosened his tie, and paused. There, on the floor just outside the conference room, a small figure, kneeling, scrubbing, hard. "What the hell are you doing here?" His voice echoed through the glass and marble like a thunderclap. The girl looked up slowly. Her eyes were huge, brown, too knowing, too calm for someone so small, but her hands trembled. "I'm cleaning, sir," she said quietly. Daniel blinked, confused. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old? In his building, at 2 in the morning? He walked closer, his shoes tapping sharply against the polished floor. "Mrs. Johnson said if I did a good job, I could sleep in the storeroom tonight." He stopped in his tracks. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Isabella, sir. Isabella Turner. I'm 8.5. 8.5. Like it mattered. She sat back on her heels, still holding the damp hushing like it was part of her body, still trembling but not afraid. "I know how to clean. I can organize papers. And I'm really quiet when I sleep." She paused. "Mrs. Johnson said that's important." Daniel couldn't breathe for a second. He had spent 43 years building an empire. Richardson and Associates, the biggest financial consulting firm in New York. And now, right in the heart of it, was this little girl who thought cleaning in the middle of the night might help her survive. He crouched down in front of her. "Isabella, where are your parents?" "My mom's working the night shift at the hospital. She's a nurse." She looked down, scrubbing again, like if she just kept moving, the world wouldn't fall apart. "She said I can't go home tonight because things are complicated there." Daniel looked around. The rich leather chairs, the sleek desks, the breathtaking view of Central Park below, and then back at the girl. Her oversized sweater, the frayed sneakers, the raw skin on her little knuckles. None of this made sense. "What about Mrs. Johnson?" he asked. "Who is she to you?" Isabella didn't look up. "She's the cleaning supervisor. She says my mom should be grateful I have a job here, that I need to learn how things work early, that it'll make me strong." Daniel's jaw tightened. Margaret Johnson. He knew the name. She'd been there for years, known for being efficient. But now he wondered what that word had really meant. "Isabella, have you done this before?" She nodded. "A few times, when my mom can't find someone to watch me. Mrs. Johnson says it's better for me to learn to be helpful, early." She hesitated. Her voice changed, lower, sadder, "Because people like me have to work twice as hard to get half as much." Daniel felt something crack. He stood up, slowly. "Drop that rag," he said, reaching out his hand. "You shouldn't be here." She stared at him like he was dangerous, not because he was angry, but because he was promising something better. And that kind of promise could break a heart if it didn't come true. "But if I don't finish," she whispered, Mrs. Johnson will get mad at my mom, and my mom needs this job." Daniel had never felt so helpless in his own building. He looked at the little girl on the floor, cleaning to protect her mother, working like a grown woman, carrying fear like it was sewn into her skin. He took a breath. "Isabella," he said carefully, "I think you and I need to have a very serious talk with Mrs. Johnson." She didn't answer, just stared at him, waiting. And Daniel, the man who had spent a lifetime calculating every move, every risk, every return, realized something that would stay with him forever. Some things you don't calculate, you just do what's right, even if it changes everything. Daniel didn't sleep that night, not a second. He sat in his office, lights low, staring out over the city. The file he came to collect lay untouched on his desk, because all he could see was Isabella, 8 years old, tiny hands, that rag in her fingers, and the words she'd said. They echoed like a warning he'd never heard before. "People like me have to work twice as hard to get half as much." He closed his eyes. For decades, he'd focused on numbers, strategies, growth charts, profit margins. But this was something else entirely. At 7:15 the next morning, his door creaked open. "Mr. Richardson," came a familiar voice. Margaret Johnson stepped in, her posture straight, her expression carefully arranged, polite, controlled. "I heard there was a misunderstanding last night." Daniel didn't look up from his desk. "Misunderstanding," he repeated quietly. He slowly lifted his eyes. "That's what you call an 8-year-old girl working in my office at 2 o'clock in the morning?" Margaret adjusted her glasses. No reaction. "The girl's mother, Carla Turner, begged me to let her daughter stay here for a few hours. She works night shifts, extra hours. I thought teaching responsibility at an early age might be educational." Daniel stood up slowly. "Educational?" he said, like the word tasted sour. "What kind of education, exactly, were you giving her?" Margaret tilted her chin. "With all due respect, sir," she said carefully, "people like the Turners need to understand that nothing in life is free. I was offering that girl a chance to understand the value of work." Daniel leaned back against his desk, arms crossed. He had worked with Margaret for 8 years, always thought she was thorough, precise, efficient. Now he realized he had mistaken cruelty for competence. "Where did you grow up, Margaret?" he asked, voice calm. She blinked. "Excuse me." "Where," he repeated, "did you grow up?" "In Connecticut," she said slowly. "My father was—" She hesitated, sensing the trap. "An accountant." He nodded. "Lawyer? Doctor? Someone who never needed an 8-year-old child to work in an office at night just to keep a roof over their heads?" She didn't answer. He stepped forward, voice soft but firm. "Isabella is not an employee. She's a child." Margaret's expression didn't change. "She's a child who needs to learn her place in the social hierarchy," she said, voice tightening. Daniel froze. Those words hit like a punch. "Come again?" he asked. "You built this company by understanding reality, Mr. Richardson," she said. "There are people who give orders and people who follow them. I'm just preparing the next generation for that truth." A silence fell between them, heavy, cold. Then he asked, "Where is Carla Turner now?" "At the hospital," Margaret said. She's working a double shift to make ends meet." "And Isabella?" he asked. Margaret hesitated. "Well, the community center has a social program, but it's full of people like her. I thought exposing the girl to a more refined environment might help her development." Daniel turned toward the window. Outside in Central Park, children were laughing on expensive playgrounds, being children, while their nannies, many of them black like Carla, stood quietly on the sidelines. He turned back. "Do you have kids, Margaret?" "No, sir," she said flatly. "I've dedicated my life to my career." He nodded slowly, then explained something to me. "How exactly did you become an expert in child development for families you clearly despise?" She opened her mouth, closed it. No words came out. "Your intentions," Daniel said, cutting her off, "were to teach an 8-year-old girl that her only place in this world is beneath people like us. Isn't that right?" She didn't flinch. Instead, she said, "Mr. Richardson, the real world has hierarchies. I see no issue with preparing people to accept their role within them." Daniel walked behind his desk, sat down. He picked up the phone. "Jennifer," he said calmly, "cancel my meetings today. Something urgent's come up." Margaret blinked, startled. "Sir, I hope you're not making a rash decision over one emotional moment." Daniel's voice dropped. "No, I'm making a necessary decision, because today you showed me exactly who you are. Now I'm going to show you who I am." Margaret stood there, silent, rigid. For the first time in years, Daniel realized something. He had let someone like her set the rules. In his own house, not anymore. 3 days passed. 3 long days, where Daniel couldn't shake the image of Isabella, her tiny frame bent over the floor, her voice so clear, so calm, saying things no child should ever have to say. He walked through his office, and everything looked different. The same walls, the same furniture. Now, he didn't see numbers, or reports, or projections. He saw people. And behind the people, stories. Some of them beautiful, most of them invisible. Invisible like Isabella had been. Until now. "Jennifer," he said that morning, pausing at his assistant's desk, "I need a meeting. Full human resources team. Today, 3 o'clock. She looked up, surprised. "Yes, sir. That's unusual. May I ask why?" Daniel hesitated. "Internal audit," he said quietly. "I want to understand who we've hired and who we haven't." At 2:45, he stepped into his car, but he didn't go home. He didn't go to lunch. He drove to the General Hospital. Finding Carla Turner wasn't hard. She was exactly as Margaret had described her. A black woman in scrubs rushing between patients, eyes heavy with exhaustion and strength. She turned when he called her name. "Nurse Turner?" She froze. Then her expression changed. Fear. Instant. Deep. "Mr. Richardson, I can explain," she said quickly. "I'm so sorry. Isabella won't bother you again. I promise." Daniel held up his hand. "Wait, what did Margaret say to you?" Carla looked around nervously. Her voice dropped. "She said, if Isabella was seen in the office again, I'd lose my recommendation for the advanced nursing program, the one I've been working toward for 5 years." Daniel clenched his jaw. Margaret hadn't just exploited a child. She'd blackmailed a mother. Carla, did that decision come from my office? No, sir, she said, shaking her head. She told me she had full authority, said you trusted her. Lie number one, Daniel muttered. Would you be willing to write a statement about what she said to you? Carla hesitated. Mr. Richardson, I need this job, and Isabella needs me to have it. He looked her in the eye. What if I guaranteed you wouldn't lose it? What if I told you, not only will you keep your job, you'll finish that program with a scholarship from the company itself? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Tears welled up instead. Why? She asked softly. Why would you do that for us? Daniel's voice cracked. Because your daughter reminded me what justice looks like. Back at the office, the HR meeting was already underway. Patricia Miller, head of the department, stood at the screen, arms folded. Margaret sat beside her, calm, polished, still pretending this was business as usual, until Daniel entered. Let's get started, he said, taking his seat. I want an honest look at our hiring practices, demographics, roles. Let's go back 10 years. Patricia cleared her throat. Well, sir, our diversity ratings are technically within compliance. Technically, he said. Explain. We do have minority hires, she said cautiously, but they tend to fill certain roles. What kind of roles? Margaret spoke up, smooth as ever. Cleaning, security, general services, roles that match natural skills and practical expectations. Daniel turned toward her slowly. And in executive roles, how diverse are we there? Patricia paused. We have strict qualification protocols, she said carefully. The silence in the room was suffocating. Then Daniel spoke, voice low and deliberate. Margaret, tell me, what qualifications does Isabella lack? To say play on a playground instead of cleaning my office at 2 a.m.? Margaret stiffened. That was a specific situation. Daniel didn't flinch. How specific are the situations of all the other black employees who mysteriously seem qualified only for certain roles here? She opened her mouth, then stopped. He turned to Patricia. Do you agree with Margaret's view of natural aptitudes? Patricia looked down. Mr. Richardson, we follow protocol, but those protocols, they were established by Margaret. And there it was, the truth. He had built a system, without even realizing it, and now it was staring him in the face. Later that night, Daniel made a phone call. Michael, it's Daniel Richardson. I need your help. Michael Santos, corporate investigator, specialist in employment discrimination cases, ruthless, brilliant, honest. It's 9 p.m., Michael said. This must be serious. Daniel stared out the window. More serious than anything I've ever faced. I want you to investigate my company. Every hire, every promotion, every firing, last 10 years. Michael paused. You're asking me to dig into something that could destroy everything you've built. Daniel nodded. No, I'm asking you to save what's left of my soul. 2 hours later, Michael and his team were in Daniel's office. Laptops open, files ready. The work had begun. And as the night fell over the city, Daniel looked down at the lights below. wondering how many little girls like Isabella had been taught that their only value was silence and obedience. But not anymore. This time, someone was listening. Monday morning. The air in the boardroom was tense. 12 executives sat in silence waiting. No one checked their phones, no one whispered, because everyone knew something big was coming. At exactly 9 a.m., Daniel walked in. Not with a folder, not with a smile, but with Michael Santos, and a stack of documents that shook like thunder when he dropped them on the table. "Gentlemen," Daniel said, his voice steady, "today we're going to talk about what's been happening at Richardson and Associates for the last 10 years, and what ends today." Margaret Johnson sat calmly at the far end of the table, polished as always, glasses adjusted just right. She smiled politely. "Sir, I wasn't informed of any audit." "You'll want to hear this," Daniel cut in, cold and sharp. Michael stepped forward. "We've conducted a full audit of the company's hiring and promotion data," he began. "Starting with this." He clicked a remote. A graph appeared on the screen behind him. Out of 243 hires made under Margaret Johnson's management, only 17 were black. A few board members shifted in their seats. Michael continued. "Of those 17, every single one was placed in either cleaning or security roles. Not one was hired into an administrative, technical, or executive position." Margaret's voice cracked through the silence. "That's a statistical coincidence." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Then let's move on to emails." The next slide appeared. An email from Margaret to Patricia. Subject: Candidate Williams. Excellent qualifications, but not the right cultural fit. Suggest reassigning to a more suitable position. Taken out of context, Margaret said quickly. "I was referring to team chemistry." Michael didn't pause. "Here are 15 more emails," he said, "all written in the same coded language, all used to quietly exclude qualified black candidates." Margaret's face went pale, but Michael wasn't done. "Next, audio recordings. Company property, recorded during work hours. All admissible." He pressed play. Margaret's voice filled the room. "We need someone with the right profile, someone the clients feel comfortable with. You know what I mean." Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Margaret stood up. "This is illegal wiretapping." "Company equipment," Michael said. "Company time. You signed the policy agreement yourself." Then came the final blow. "The case of Carla Turner," Michael said, pulling out a transcript. A board member frowned. "The nurse?" Michael nodded. "Yes, the mother of Isabella Turner. The 8-year-old girl found working in this building at 2 a.m. Someone in the room gasped. Michael read from the recording. "If Isabella's seen here again, you can forget your recommendation. Don't push me, Carla." Margaret's voice, clear, cold, unapologetic. Margaret's hands shook. This is a setup. Daniel, come on. Over one incident?" Daniel finally stood. "One incident?" He stared at her. Not with anger, with something worse. Disappointment. "You harmed 47 families," he said quietly. "You forced a child to work, to protect her mother's job, and you blackmailed that mother with her future." She looked around the room, desperate for support. She found none, just disgust. "Margaret Johnson," Daniel said. You have two options. Resign today with a letter citing philosophical differences, or be terminated for cause. We will also file suits for discrimination and child labor. She stepped back. Child labor? She whispered, as if the words couldn't possibly apply to her. You had an 8-year-old cleaning your office in the middle of the night, Daniel said. That's not mentorship, that's exploitation. Margaret's face twisted, not from guilt, but from humiliation. She picked up her purse, turned toward the door, and paused. But Daniel didn't speak, didn't offer her grace, didn't offer her a soft landing. She left, and with her went the silent permission that had allowed all of this to happen. When the room finally emptied, Daniel sat alone at the table. He thought of Isabella. At school, maybe eating lunch, maybe playing tag, doing what children should be doing, what Margaret had tried to convince him she didn't deserve. That afternoon, he called Michael into his office. I want full documentation, he said. Every email, every policy, every family affected. Michael nodded. This is going to take time. I don't care, Daniel said. I built this company with relentless precision. Now I'm going to rebuild it the same way. And Margaret? Michael asked. She's gone, Daniel said. But she wasn't the only one. And she wasn't. She was just the face of a structure that Daniel had allowed to grow in his shadow. No more. Because now he'd seen it. Now he knew. And when Daniel Richardson knew, he acted. 6 months later, everything had changed. The marble floors were still polished. The skyline still sparkled beyond the tall glass windows. But Richardson and Associates was no longer the same company. It felt different, because it was different. Daniel sat at his desk, flipping through the latest diversity audit. His fingers slowed as he read. 42 new hires, 31 from ethnic minorities, most in executive, tech, or strategy roles, all based purely on merit. A quiet smile crept across his face. There was a knock on the door. Come in, he said. Jennifer, his longtime assistant, stepped in with a folder and a hopeful grin. Forbes wants to do a story, she said, on the company's transformation. Apparently, other firms are following our model. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Our model, he repeated, smiling. Then he looked past her, out the window, across the street in Central Park. There, on the grass, was Isabella, laughing, spinning in circles, her arms out wide like a bird. She wasn't holding a rag. She wasn't cleaning floors. She was just being a child, free. And right beside her, sitting on a bench with a coffee in hand, was Carla Turner. Not in scrubs this time. No, now she wore a blazer. Sharp, confident. She was the new director of human resources at Richardson and Associates. Yes, the same Carla Margaret once blackmailed. The same woman who had to choose between her career and her child's safety. Now, she led the very department that once ignored her, and she'd completed the advanced nursing program too, with a full scholarship funded by the company, because Daniel had made her a promise and kept it. The office door swung open again, this time unannounced. Mommy! Isabella ran in, her backpack bouncing behind her. She threw her arms around Carla's waist. I learned about financial math today. she said breathlessly. "The teacher said I can be anything I want when I grow up." Carla smiled and smoothed her daughter's hair. "And what do you want to be?" Isabella turned to Daniel, grinning wide. "I want to have a company like Mr. Daniel's, but one that helps kids like me go to school." Daniel stood, walked over, knelt beside her. "You know you can count on me for that, right?" he said softly. She hugged him, tight. Over the past few months, Daniel had become something more than a CEO to Isabella. He'd become a mentor, a protector, in many ways, a father. Not out of guilt, not out of charity, out of respect because he saw her. Not as a case, not as a project, but as a person. A brilliant little girl who had lived through too much and still dared to dream. She looked up at him, her eyes serious now. "Mr. Daniel?" "Yes?" "Thank you for seeing me that night. Not the way Margaret did, but as a kid who needed help." Daniel's heart ached in the best kind of way. For 43 years, he had measured success in numbers. In deals closed, accounts gained, growth charts climbing up and to the right. But now, he had learned something new. True success isn't about how much you earn. It's about how many lives you lift. And when you build with fairness, with equity, with heart, turns out profits follow too. Because hiring real talent without prejudice brings real results. And talent had never been limited to any race, any zip code, or any so-called profile. Margaret had tried to protect the company with her standards, but in truth, she had been its greatest limitation. Carla laughed as Isabella skipped across the office toward a drawing table. She pulled out a folder, looked at Daniel. "There's something you should see," she said. He opened it. Inside, plans for a new scholarship fund. One designed specifically for children from working-class families, named after Carla's late grandmother, funded by the company, and inspired by one little girl with a rag in her hand and fire in her heart. Daniel nodded, tears threatening. "I want it live by the end of the quarter," he said. As Carla left to pick up her daughter's things, Daniel stayed at the window, watching the sunlight stretch across the city, watching the place that used to be his kingdom of numbers become something human. Behind him, Isabella was humming, drawing, free. 2 years later, she would start at the best private school in the city, full scholarship, top of her class, with a new name on her student ID. Isabella Turner Richardson. Yes, Daniel had adopted her, because sometimes family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up when no one else does. And Margaret? Well, she had just left her third failed job interview that month. Her reputation burned. Her methods exposed. Her future uncertain. At her last interview, the manager had said, "Unfortunately, you're just not the right fit for our culture." The same coded words she had once used to push others aside. Life has a way of coming full circle. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's an 8-year-old girl who reminds the world what right looks like. And sometimes it's a man with too much power, choosing to use it. Finally, to do something good, not for applause, not for headlines, but because once he saw a child on the floor, and for the first time in decades, he really looked.